Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with reference recordings. And today we're talking about Tchaikovsky's The Nutcracker, the complete ballet. Now, this is a very interesting, all of these are interesting. They're interesting because each work has its own sort of discographic history. And part of the fun of this series of talks is unraveling that. And this one is a little bit difficult to unravel. It's easy to describe, but I really wanted to see if I could figure out the dates of things for this one, but it was impossible, as it turns out, because, well, we'll get to that. So the Nutcracker, yes, everybody loves the Nutcracker, don't we? It's delightful. It's amazingly scored. And one of the things that's happened since you could get it complete, because back in the day, you only heard the suite, just that short segment of little movements consisting of the tiny little overture and the little march from the first part, and then the dances, the characteristic dances from the second act. But the whole ballet is very symphonic in conception. It flows wonderfully, and it's full of great stuff that the suites left out. But of course, nobody knew that unless you went to actually see the ballet. Recording complete ballets was a very strange notion for the record industry, particularly coming out of the 78 era, where suites were wonderful because little jiggly movements fit on a side of a 78, so you could do sniglets and be in very, very good shape. On the other hand, to do complete symphonic things, it involved breaks and things like that, and people thought, gee whiz, everyone knows what the popular parts are, and it fits so nicely. Why, sort of worry about it? But then when the LP came along, it became possible to record things in longer bits, and the Nutcracker really works out well because it's about 70 minutes long. So you could get it on, usually it was issued on like 2 LPs back in the day, or 3 sides or something like that. And then it became possible to do it all at 1 LP, and of course it fits perfectly on a single CD. So we were in business as far as complete Nutcrackers went. We really were. But it all started with a recording which became the immediate reference. And that's very rare, that like the first major recording of something would become the reference recording. But that's what happened, because it was a wonderful recording. It was Antal Dorati with the London Symphony on Mercury Living Presence. Now, the irony with this business of reference recordings of Nutcrackers is that they all seem to be almost out of print, almost sort of kind of. Well, this one isn't. Not exactly. It's a bit of a story, but let's find it. Where do we find the original one? Or at least something that looks like the original one. Well, it's sort of here in this giant Mercury Living Presence cube, which is out of print. It was the first one in the series. And let's see if we can find it. It was somewhere around up there. It was. And here it is still. They put it on 2 CDs, which was completely unnecessary, but they did that to sell more of them. There it is. This was the original complete Nutcracker stereo, fabulous, gorgeous, glorious recording that was made in 1962. I don't think Dorati did a mono one. He did a mono Swan Lake, if I'm not mistaken, and then a stereo one, because he was doing complete Tchaikovsky ballets, which was unheard of at the time. So here it was. And it's an absolutely splendid performance, gorgeously recorded. And back in 1962, this was what you got. And it didn't date. It was just such a fine performance. Dorati was a wonderful conductor, as we all know. And so there it is. So let me see here. I'll have to put this away. 34, CD 35, and 36, I think is what this is. Yes. So I'm putting this back in its cube. Now, here's where things get complicated. Mercury Living Presence stopped making LPs, I think, around 1968. It was eventually acquired by what is now Universal Music Group and what was then Polygram. But at the same time, Antal Dorati, there was years when the whole Mercury catalog was unavailable, and Antal Dorati was recording for Decca and Philips, those labels. And as part of what people do when they go to new record labels, they remake all the stuff they did for the previous label. And so Dorati remade the Nutcracker here. The Nutcracker on Philips with the Concertgouw Orchestra. Now, what year was this? This was let's see here, 1976, it would seem. Yes, it looks like this is 1976 or thereabouts. And this became the new reference recording because the Mercury one was nowhere to be found. But this is where all those dates came in that I was trying to figure out. The history of the record industry in terms of mergers and acquisitions and things like that is insane. And it's particularly insane when you're dealing with larger labels, because Mercury Records had Mercury Living Presence, which was a subsidiary of Mercury, but Mercury was a pop and jazz music label. And so, it's not classical that determines anything these days. If you're a part of a large conglomerate or a larger record label, it's the pop stuff that makes money. That's what determines who buys you and who wants to buy you. So the Mercury classical catalog was for quite some time in the 1970s largely sidelined. It was related somehow to Philips Records, which issued parts of it and kept some of it available, or sucked up some of it and stuck it on its own label. So the tapes were down there. And it wasn't until, Wilma Cozart Fine came back at the behest of Universal in the CD era, Wilma, who was the original producer of all this stuff, and remastered everything for CD and all that stuff, that Mercury and these cubes started coming out, that Mercury sort of reestablished itself as an independent sub-label of Universal. And we were all thrilled and excited. It's wonderful. And one of the things that popped up was the Dorati Nutcracker in competition with this one, the Concertgouw one. Now, this became the reference because, first of all, it was Dorati again. And his tempi had slowed down a tiny fraction, tiny bit, nothing to worry about. And he had the Concertgouw, and it was Philips. He made a classy label with the greatest orchestra in the universe for like woodwinds playing and things like that. I mean, it was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful performance. And so everyone forgot about the Mercury one. But then it turned out, as luck would have it, that Mercury and Philips were now all under the same umbrella as Universal, and Mercury was getting reestablished as kind of an independent voice within the classical umbrella. And so Philips was acquired by Decca, and so Decca reissued the Dorati Nutcracker, but they didn't reissue this one, the Philips one, which is most of what Decca has done. They've taken Philips and simply stuffed their name on it. They reissued the earlier Mercury one as part of a Decca twofer, along with, I think it was like Sleeping Beauty excerpts or something with Antal Fistulari, which was also on Mercury. And though not coupled the way this was coupled originally, it's nuts. So where are we with reference recordings of the Nutcracker? Well, what happened is, we have cat having fun over there. What happened is we've got the original Mercury, Dorati, London Symphony Nutcracker sort of kind of available. This one seems to have disappeared. This is why I have the overflow room, folks, because this has vanished. And I was looking to see, I remember there was a Philips Duo that had this on it. But no, the Decca Duo of the Philips Duo has the other one on it. So it's a mess. It's a mess. It's ridiculous because Dorati was in competition with himself, as luck would have it, through a series of mergers and acquisitions and corporate shenanigans. And so there are two reference Nutcracker recordings, both conducted by Antal Dorati, one with the London Symphony, originally on Mercury from 1962, one with the Concertgouw Orchestra that was originally on Philips from 1976, and God knows where they are now, because with the way things have it, they'll probably all be out of print. But the bottom line is that they're much easier to get through streaming services, I believe, than as physical product, because the physical product situation with these recordings is going to be a catastrophe going forward. I can probably assure you of that. Whereas, streaming, at least it's Dorati, Antal Dorati. It's all listed below there, and those are your reference Nutcrackers. Now, since then, since the 1960s and 70s, there have been about a bazillion complete Nutcrackers, many of which are absolutely glorious, fabulous. I mean, Previn did one, of course, with the London Symphony as part of his series of Tchaikovsky ballets. Seiji Ozawa made a gorgeous one with the Boston Symphony. Leonard Slatkin did a terrific one. Gergiev did an excellent one on Old Phillips with his Kirov Orchestra. There is no shortage. And of course, we cannot forget one of the best nutcrackers of all, which was on Vanguard with Maurice Abravanel and the Utah Symphony. It's a fantastic nutcracker that connoisseurs know about. There are lots of good nutcrackers, and I did a video, of course, about nutcracker recordings, the best nutcracker recordings. So you can go look at that video. But for reference recording purposes, the guy has always been Dorati. That is not controversial. It really isn't. I mean, when I was growing up, if you asked anybody or you read a review of a recording of the Nutcracker or anything, or even the suite, they would say, oh, this is a lovely suite, but you should really get the complete ballet that Dorati did for, Phillips with the Concertgouw or Mercury Living Presence. I mean, everyone knew that Dorati was your go-to guy for Tchaikovsky's The Nutcracker. And for reference purposes, he still is. You cannot go wrong. But then again, The Nutcracker is one of those pieces that it turned out when people started listening to it complete that it was so well written and so beautiful and so effective that you would really have to be a complete moron to blow it. I mean, not that people didn't do it. There's some people did less interesting ones and some people did better ones. But still, if it doesn't exactly play itself, it comes very close. Nonetheless, Dorati's your guy, the unambiguous reference recording. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.